Jesus is trying to teach us that we have to love God first and foremost and above all. He says today in the gospel, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And when we hear those words, they sound harsh to us. At least they sound harsh to me when you first hear them, without really thinking about it and reflecting on it. So Jesus, let's be clear, is not saying that we should not love our father and mother. Jesus is not saying we shouldn't love our children. And one of the basic 10 Commandments is that you love, honor, and obey your mother and father. It's the only commandment that has a promise attached to it. So important is that commandment. You think about the love of a mother and father, particularly for a newborn child. And when that little baby first comes into existence, comes to birth, that love of mother and father just overflows with gratitude for this little baby. A recent dad described the experience this way. He said, when that baby was placed in my arms, tears started flowing, and he said, it didn't stop. Never seen anything so beautiful in all my life. There are tears of gratitude and joy. That love there between a child and their parent is one of the most deep, passionate things in the world. When that little baby comes into the world, everything is changed. Everything is different. Many parents would say, I would happily die for my child. There's a deep, passionate connection between them. And yet Jesus says, unless you love me more than that. So, what's he trying to get at? He's trying to help us to understand the depths of our connection with God. St. John in his first letter that is really, in a way, a treatise on love, on divine love, on the love God has for us and the love we should have for God. He says, we love God because he has loved us first. He has already loved us more. And so we're called to love like that. You think about when a little baby comes into the world, there's in any kind of love commitment that we have in our lives, any kind of love obligation that we have, means that there are external obligations that we have to fulfill towards that person that we love. Basic things that are expected. And so what Jesus is saying to us is that if our obligation to him is not greater than any kind of other obligations you feel like you have in your life, even those the most intense between a parent and a child and their parent. If our obligations to God are not more intense than those natural obligations that we have, then we're not worthy. See, one thing that God cannot be is secondary. We can't prefer anything before God. God will not. He cannot be set aside. So how do we do that? St. Augustine teaches us that, he says, I love other people and other things only truly when I love them for the sake of God. I only love other people and things then we're in a manipulative relationship then. If I care and love about another just for me, for my sake, for what they can do for me, then we're in a dominating, manipulative relationship there. When we love anything, stuff in the world, just for my own sake, that's a self-absorbed, self-referential kind of love. The church teaches us that we're all born with original sin. And even though original sin gets washed away, the stain or the mark of that sin remains. We call that the 25-cent word we use in the Catholic churches. We call that concupiscence. It's a basic tendency to put myself first. To love others, to love stuff in this world for my sake, for me. That's a basic tendency that we all struggle with. And if we get into it, then the way that we treat others, the way that we love others, the way that we love even God, is in as much as they can, what they give me and do for me. So if our love is measured in any way, if we measure out our love in any way, what God is revealing to us in that, if we see in ourselves measuring out our love towards others or towards God, it's because that we are given into that basic sin of concupiscence, that basic sin of being self-centered. So Jesus, when he's talking about this, he then goes to the heart of the matter. He says, whoever doesn't take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. See, that self-referential, self-centered love has to die in us. That's why in another place Jesus says, unless you deny yourself. See, unless we're able to really put God first and foremost, which means being willing to take up our cross. Not just deal with the crosses that were given grudgingly and with bitterness and resentment. And see, let's be honest, that's the way we often do that. That's the way that I often do that. Instead, what Jesus says is, take up your cross. Don't just wait for it to be imposed upon it. Happily, willingly, take up your cross. With eagerness and a deep desire out of love for God, take up your cross. Be willing to suffer for the sake of God and for the sake of others. Jesus is telling us, unless you love me more than anything else in the world, unless you're really willing to walk my way, live in my truth. The thing is that we too easily let things get between us and God. See, the sinner's version of the good life is that I get others to bear my burdens. And if you're not going to take up my burdens for me, then I don't want to have anything to do with you. If you're not going to make my life easier, then forget you. So we ask the Lord to show us today how I can make lighter the burdens that others carry. How can we help each other to carry our crosses? How can we love God first and foremost and above all? It's by loving others, by loving the stuff in our world for God's sake and not for our own. Amen.